Hey guys, and welcome to Top Channel 1-on-1. So today I want to show you a detailed process of how I created this dirt path using Blender and geometry nodes. It's procedurally generated and it can conform to the terrain, so it can go over hills, and you just use a curve. I'm going to demonstrate how to use it, but it's best of a curve, so you can draw the curve and it will fit. The path will be generated around that curve or onto that curve. You can add leaves, you can add stones, and everything you want. And these trees, these assets can be interchanged. If you have your own assets, you can use them here. I'm just using the ones I have just to demo what this path can do. You can adjust the width. There's a lot of parameters you can play with. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to open up the original Blend file. You can see the path here. Now if I go to edit mode, you can see it's a path, and I can draw. Let me draw a path like that, and you can see what happens. The path is just drawn on top of this. So if you see that it's starting to intersect with the terrain, you just have to go to the path you've drawn and just move it a bit up, and it should be wrapping over the surface. And you can see around this hill how this goes up and then goes down. I have a few parameters exposed here. You can show the road, you can show leaves, you can show plants, or you can show or disable them, and you have other parameters you can play with here, like the density of the light trees. So if I reduce that, you can see we get less. Yeah, basically self-explanatory settings here. And one other thing, I made this so that it's more customizable. So if you wanted more control over this, let's go to geometry nodes. Organize these into easier to read node groups. So if I wanted, maybe you wanted another thing, maybe you have a bunch of houses you want to add on the side. So let me see house. Let me grab a house from my asset. Let me get something simple that is not too heavy, because our project is already heavy. Let me find something simple, like maybe this house here. Now we want to spawn it on the same path like that. I can have it in a collection, call it maybe houses, and I go to the path and just duplicate one of these, Shift D, like that. Now let me just preview just this, and then all you need to connect is this path here from this node here. Connect that. Connect is best. Connect the bare rod directly into the geometry, and you can see we have some rocks, and that's because we're still using the rocks here. But if I switch to houses, you can see I get the houses. Now you have a few options here. I have random all turned on. That means that the rotation of all these is the rotation of the houses is just random everywhere, but I can switch that off so that we have rotation only in the Z axis. And let me bring the density down so that we don't have as many houses. Okay, so you can see now I can just additionally add this to the join group, to the main group here, and preview that. And you can see now our path has some houses. Yeah, so now you can see that we have some houses. And again, these parameters on this will not be exposed here. The ones that are exposed here are just the main parameters here, or the main components of the nodes. But if you want to add anything, you can just duplicate any of this and change the collection. Make sure it's connected to the node group, to this node group, and connected to the to the main join group here, and you'll have things here. You get access to all the other things, like the minimum and maximum scale here. So I can just scale this up. The issue is that I have a lot of stuff in here, so it's getting a bit crowded. So I'm going. Yeah, you get the point, and you can clear the path. Maybe push this a bit away from the road if you want. So maybe we could bring back the small plants, and bring back the rocks, and maybe even bring back the trees, the large trees, like that. So very, very easy way to set up. And like I said, it goes around. This will follow the path as we want. Okay, so let's jump into the tutorial and show you how to set up this. Okay, so going in, I've prepared the project with a few groups here. I've created this group that contains the ground objects, that's the terrain with a plane and a few rocks here. I want to have the path drawn onto the surface and then comes on onto this. So let's do that. We're going to start with a curve object because, like I said, this is going to be based on a curve object. So I'm just going to go to the top view here and just draw a path like that. To make, so this is the path we have. I can go to geometry nodes and set up a new geometry nodes object or setup here. Now to see this clearly, I'm just going to drag this up like that and give this a profile. To give it a profile, I'm going to use a curve to mesh, and I use a line curve as a curve line as our profile. This is going to have a side direction of -0.5 and 0.5 for the end to have a path like that. I can even add a transform node and scale this on the x-axis to make it thicker or to make the road wider. If you go to wireframe, you can see what we have. I can adjust this curve to however I want, if I want, like that. Now, if you draw the curve going up like that, you see that in some areas it will start banking or being rotated or tilted in some areas like that. For that, to remove that, you can do a set position like that and use a combine X, connect that to the position, and a combine and separate XY and connect the position node position to the vector, and then the X and Y connect to the Y like that. Now leave the Z non-connected so that our plane is directly like that. It's simply flat on a flat surface like that. Now, when you have too much rotation, you might cause a few issues there, but I wouldn't expect a path to be too angled like that, so I guess that shouldn't be a problem. So then we want to project this path directly onto the ground, and to do that we're going to use a raycast. So raycast, this is just going to shoot rays from the path down to the ground, and the ground is going to be this collection. So I'll just bring that in like that. Make sure you use relative. It gives you a hit position, so we can use another set position here. This time connect the hit position directly to the position. And another thing you will realize here is that the raycast is giving us an error, and the reason for that is that the target is supposed to be geometry, and the collection info outputs instances instead of geometry. To fix that, we're going to realize the instances, so that they become geometry. And now you can see that the path is projected onto the surface. We don't have enough resolution. You can see it's being projected, but because the path doesn't have enough resolution, it's not being projected correctly. So I'm going to come back to the curve point here, add a subdivide curve. That should give us more subdivisions to work with, and you can see we get a better projection. And we can also increase this by we can increase the length subdivisions by subdividing or resample the curve that should also give us more resolution so that this projects correctly. Now, if you're running into this issue where you have artifacts like this, it's because you have some points that are not projected. Let me explain this better. So if we go to the raycast, disable this for a second, and this is what we have. So the raycast casts rays from the geometry down to the ground, and when that ray hits the ground, the surface above it will be projected onto that hit point. And because on here, areas outside that don't get, where the arrays don't hit anything, create those artifacts that you see there. So you can see areas that are hitting the ground don't create artifacts, but the areas that are not hitting the ground create artifacts. So you can either move the path into areas that are hitting the surface to get rid of that artifact, or you can use the is hit option to just ignore the parts that are not hitting at the surface, or something like that. So I'm just going to scale this down so that everything is within the range, like that. But one other thing you will notice is that we are getting correct projection, but there is a lot of intersection. So to remove that, you can use the offset here. Just push this above the ground like that. Just a little bit, so 0.01 to reduce on the intersection. Now, for some areas where there is a lot of poking from the rock, you will need way more resolution. You will need a lot of resolution. So you can add a subdivision surface to get more resolution and increase the offset a bit. But again, I wouldn't expect a path to go over a rock like this. I would recommend to avoid steep paths like this, or you can use the blur attribute node to blur the position here. It should be vector, so hit point, and then connect this back. You can smoothen that, but you still have to push this up, or make your terrain less pokey like what we have here for this rock. I wouldn't imagine a path on a rock, and a steep rock like this, but this is just for demonstration purposes. I'm leaving out the blur attribute because I know some of you might be using 3.4, which doesn't support the blur attribute. Anyway, so this is what we have for the path. Now let's make this look like a path by setting up our textures and materials. So to do that, we can do a set material here, create a new material, call this rod, like that, and I'll bring it here as rod. I'll change this to shader editor, and let me go to my texture folders, find some rod textures. I'll use this rod, import it in. So this is how it looks. Because we don't have any UVs for this rod, that's why we're getting this. Now to set up UVs, I'm just going to come here. I'm going to come to the original curve, and what we want to do is capture the length of this path and use it as the X component of our vector for UV mapping. So I'm going to use a store named attribute. I'm going to store this as length, curve length, or rod length. And to get the length, I'm going to use a spline parameter. There is the length option and a spline parameter. There's a length option and a factor. I'm just going to use a factor because that gives us a nice gradient. And I'm also going to do the same for this line here. This one is going to, the length of the rod is going to give us the X factor of the X component of the UVs. And then the spline parameter, the factor the spline parameter for this, I'm going to use this as the width. So let me connect this factor. So we can call this road width and get an attribute node. Copy this, paste it in here. Look at that. You can see that we get the X, we get the length, and then for the road, copy this, road width, you see we get that. So we have the X and Y component. So if I use this, I can use this as road length. I can use an X combine. So this is going to be the X and this is going to be the Y. Connect this into this, and now we have our UV coordinates like that. One thing you will see is that the texture is stretched a lot in the X direction. Make the stretching less. What we can do is come in here on this length and just use a math node. Set this to multiply. Now we can make it shorter. But I think the UVs are also rotated wrongly, so I can switch these around. Yeah, so we have our road like that. Again, you can multiply this or to stretch it less or stretch it more. So we have our path. I'm not going to care about the seam. It's a result of the texture. It's not the setup we have. It's a result of the texture not tiling correctly. But you can also bring in more stuff. You can also bring in a different texture like this. Make sure you're using the same UV coordinates. If you look at that, we get that. Now for this, I want this to be, the grass to be in the middle, so I can just add a vector math and just add on the Y direction so that I can offset the grass a bit. I can mix the two, maybe with overlay. Or screen, whatever works for you best. And I connect this to the base, and we have a road. I can connect the roughness to the roughness, and maybe even add a math node just to make it more rough. If you want, you can even add a bump detail to this. So the road looks a bit bumpy like that. Now I want this texture to be, this road to be able to blend into the ground a bit. Actually, let me get ground, more detailed ground with something like this. Yeah, let me add this other ground surface. Just edit it a bit. And to make it part of the ground, just move it to the ground collection, and you see that now the hill is as above the ground. So I want this to be able to blend into different terrains or different surfaces. Just make this a bit, yeah. So I want this to be able to blend into different surfaces. So what I'm going to do is I can come back in here, create another store named attribute. This time I'm going to call this middle road, middle, or road middle, road mid. And I'm still going to use the factor. And let's preview how this mask is going to help us blend the surface. So it's right now it's just the same as the road width, but if I add a ramp, a color ramp, just add a node in the middle, make the other one dark, we get something like this. So now I can use this as the alpha So let me bring this down here. Connect this as the alpha. If we look at the material now, just scroll down, make sure this is set to alpha blend. I don't need any shadows for this road. So you see that we have a path that blends in, but it's blending in too much. So I'm going to add a ramp to control the blending. And the edges, I want them to not be super blended like that. So I'm going to add a map range and add a noise texture to the maximum here. Is it to the minimum? Let's first look at the mask, just the mask. Yeah, so I'm going to add a ramp. Or if you want, you can use just a mix node, set it to color. So this is A and this is B. If we preview this, we can use color burn or color dodge to create some nice blending. And increase the detail. Now, if we look at this, you can see how this is starting to blend into the road or into the surrounding terrain. Can even add a color ramp here to give it more contrast if I want to. So you can see what's happening here. Yeah, depends on how much blending you want for the surface. So you can see our path taking shape. Now we can add some leaves, like in the example here. You see we have some leaves. So for that, just going to come here. I want to start from, I think, from here. Actually, from here. I want to use this as the base. And actually, I could just grab this, except the original path. So grab all of this, Ctrl G, call this, name this as base road. So everything is going to be built on top of this. It's where we build the road itself. Now we can add leaves and everything else. We don't need that many outputs for this. So I'm going to go in here and just remove one of the outputs. Yeah, so that's where we at. Actually, I think I can just, we don't need this input. I can use the group input. Add the geometry. Okay, so that's what we have. I can duplicate this using Ctrl-Shift-D to have another copy of this. And that starts with this. So first things first, we're going to instance a few planes that are going to have our leaves and maybe even everything else. So what we're going to do is just create a distribute points on instances, a distribute points on instances. I like that. And we want to instance on points. Instance on points. Now what we want to instance are planes. Plane or grid. This we don't have planes in geometry nodes. Yeah, something like that. We want to set up a node group that is going to work for the leaves, rocks, and other things like we saw previously. So this is going to be our leaves. We want to give this a random rotation. So let's use a random value vector. Connect this to the rotation. But I don't want any rotation in the, I want just the rotation in the Z axis. Then I'm going to duplicate this, float. So we have a random scale like that. Now I'm going to reduce on the density of these and increase the distribution of these like that. And then use Raycast and bring in the original group, rock group, connect this to the target, and make sure this is relative because we want to project all of these. These are going to be the instances for our leaves. So I'm going to use a set position, connect these like that. Make sure that you realize the collection. So we have these now, yeah, projected onto the surface. But you can see they're projected on the surface, but they're flat on the surface. They're not really projected on the surface. The instances themselves are not being projected on the surface. So just realize them so that they are projected correctly like that. And if you want them to really be projected, you can even increase on the subdivisions, maybe to something like 4, like that. Again, we need to lift them a bit above the ground. Just like that. And like I said, this is just going to be used as a surface to instance our rocks, plants, and everything else. One thing we need to set up is a way to change the width of the rod. So I'm going to go to this original base rod and expose the transform node. So this here, I'm just going to use a combine XY because I want to be able to scale this on the X axis. So I'm going to use 1 and then connect this. So this can be exposed and I can name this rod width. Come in here. We can adjust the rod width. For some reason it's not working. Let me see. Why is that not the case? Oh yeah. This rod width is now being used with different instances. So if I want to change this, I would have to make sure that these are using the same input. If I want all of them to change at once. So yeah, if I can join this. So now if I adjust this width, even the instances also get adjusted. Now I still want to move them up a bit so that I can see what I'm working on. So above the surface. Okay. Now what we're going to do is distribute points on faces. Just going to grab this, distribute points on faces. So yeah, you can see our points And then the other thing I'm going to do is again instance on points, and I grab a collection, say rocks. Let me grab some rocks. Not a simple rock like this. Let me add it into there. Yes. Right now it has a lot of resolution, so let me first decimate it because we're going to need a lot of rocks. Use 0.01. Okay, I'm going to have it in a collection called rocks, like that. And now I can come back here and use a collection info. Oh, let me just drag this. Make sure you have separate children and the reset turned on, and set this as instance, and make sure you have pick instance turned on as well. Make sure I'm previewing this node. So you can see how many rocks we have. That's too much. So the density is going to be down. Actually, I can keep the density to 1 and just use a random value set to probability. That will give us a percentage value we can use to reduce this. I think it's a much more effective way to do things. Okay, the scale of these rocks is also too big. Maybe let me first apply the scale. Come back here. So you can see our rocks are there. Again, we can randomize, can use a random value for the scale. So increase the density of the rocks. We need to give them a random rotation. So just do vector random. Just want to randomize all the values like that. Now, one thing I know for sure is that rocks in the middle of the roads are usually smaller because people are stepping them and breaking on them. Cars and everything is just breaking them. So I'm going to use the attribute we're using here for the middle road. So use named attribute. It's called mid road or road mid. And so we have the scale here. I can just use a math node, set this to multiply, and multiply it with this attribute. So because this gradient is this road mid attribute is a gradient that creates a lot of, that goes from black, white, and then black at the edges. It's multiplying a value of 1 to the rocks in the middle, making them bigger, but we want the inverse. So I'm going to add a ramp. Just flip it to get what we want. So the middle rocks are smaller. And so I can even add another overall value to scale this down. Now probably need more. So let me use a density of 5, maybe 10. Yeah, so you can see now, you can make these even smaller. Now you can even also just play with the density on the first grid. So you can see we have a lot of rocks, but they are very small at the middle, and we can even make them smaller, just like that. Now, with this, this setup here is enough for everything else, like the trees and small grass or vegetation. So I can just come here, I think up to here, Ctrl G, group that, and make sure that it's what I'm previewing as well. Group that and expose a few parameters. And the first one I want to expose is the actual collection. So connect that, and I make sure that I'm using the ground or the rocks collection. If I duplicated this using Ctrl D, Ctrl Shift D, Ctrl Shift D, and let's add in some plants. I'm going to go to my quick trees add-on here. Go to weeds. Let me grab this. Okay, you can see already, because I've added it into the rock collection, it's being added to that, but I want to keep this separate. So I'm going to create a new collection, call this veg or plants. Okay, have that. Let me add in this flower as well. And what else? Maybe this fan. And scale it down, apply scale. What else? And this. So we have a flower, this, and what else? This. Yeah. So those three. This is plants. I can come in here, just switch this to plants, and join the two. Let me remove this connection now, and you can see we have that. Another thing is, if you want the distribution to be truly random for these collections, make sure you add a random value with a big range, or a range that is more than the number of objects you have in your collection. Just connect that to the instance index. That will randomize the instances in your collection here. So one thing I want to do is expose a few parameters here, like this density option here. I want to expose that. What else? Let me just duplicate this so that I'm not moving this too much. So I want to expose this probability. Another thing I want to expose is these two densities that we have. So I want this density and another density for the original meshes. We can just, yeah, so I'll call this density 2. Because remember, we started by instancing planes, or these grids. Yeah, like that. So that density is going to distribute that, and then we instance these points like that. So another thing I would like to do is expose this. Unfortunately, there's no way to expose this gradient directly. So I'm going to just add a math node with the operation. I think power usually creates, yeah, so we can either push these, we can shrink them, we can clear the path if we want to. I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to call this path clearance, like that. Come in here, I'm going to reduce the density of the plants. It seems, Oh, another thing I would do is you can see that the plants are being rotated randomly. So I'm going to come in here, and the reason for that is because of this random rotation here. So I'm going to expose that as well. So let me duplicate this, expose the minimum and the maximum rotation. So for plants where I don't want that much rotation, or any random rotation, I can just reset these like that, and they're all rotated directly up. They then can give them some rotation, slight rotation, not too much as we had before. And the rocks will retain the original rotation, random rotation they have. So now one thing we are lacking here is the ability to just adjust the position of these rocks onto the surface. So I'm going to add that. So you see this road width here, it should be, let me just duplicate, Ctrl+Shift+D. We could just have this separated like this to make our lives easier. I can add a math node on these. So if I add a multiply, with this now I can control how far or how close the vegetation is from the main road. And I can also do that here. So that will just adjust where the rocks are positioned on the road. So from there we can add, okay, we're having an issue here. Just move this closer, or just scale this up. So again, same setup if we wanted large trees. So let me go to tall trees and grab something simple like this. Okay, I've added it to the same collection and it's slowing up my setup. So let me just move it to scene, create a new collection, call this tall trees, go to the setup, duplicate this again, and I can just use Ctrl+Shift+D to duplicate this. Again, connect this to the geometry, but I want to reduce the density first because these are trees and they're heavy. So that's going to be our trees, tall trees, like that. Can even add another maybe light tree. Let me see. I don't want to use too many trees because trees can be heavy sometimes. So I use this small tree. Okay, can disable this. Come in here. I think we need to apply the scale and rotation of these. So apply scale, apply rotation of the trees. Yeah, so now you can see our trees. Again, they're quite heavy, so I'm just going to reduce the density to maybe 2. So we have some trees on our path. Again, going to join this. So you see what we have. I can scale them up. So I guess we need to go back in here and find the overall scale. Yes. So I can scale the trees up, and I guess I need to rename this to scale. So we have our path. So if you want to add houses or whatever you want to add, that's how you do it. And maybe one final thing is show you how I added the leaves, which are a bit different from how you do this. So For the leaves, I'm going to use Ctrl Shift D. Actually, I can Ctrl Shift D again here. Same setup, but this time we don't need a collection. Now we need this to be a different node group. So I'm going to come in here. Just preview just this. The setup changes a little bit, so we can come back to here, I think. Yeah, the instances, instead of using a collection, so this collection here, we can use, let me have some room for this, create some room for this. We can create a grid, connect that as our instance, a switch off pick instance. Now you can see now those are going to be our leaves. Now let me first increase the density of our leaves. Come back here. Yeah, so that's going to be our leaves. Just reduce the scale. I'm just editing what we had before, making a few slight changes. Let me just scale this here again. So these are, yeah, these are going to be our leaves. Yeah, so more leaves on the sides than in the middle. So we just have to go to our grid. Where is my grid? Grid. Yeah, so this is our grid here. I can use a set material. Now create a leaf material. A new leaf material. Like that. Now if we come here, yeah, it works. So we're also going to UV unwrap this, set up the UVs. So I'm going to use store named attribute, call this leaf UVs, and just make sure this is set to vector. Connect this and use that as here. Attribute leaf UVs. Now we need some leaves, so I'm going to go to my text folder. I think I have some leaves I could use. Yeah, let me start with this import texture. Just connect this and we have our leaves with proper UVs. Now I can connect this to the base, connect the alpha to the alpha, and I maybe connect this color to the roughness to have some roughness, and use a math node to adjust the roughness. Then going to set this to clip and clip for the shadows. So we have our leaves. Can come back to geometry nodes here and just make sure that I have the leaves connected to the system as well. So yeah, you can see where the leaves are. Now I'm going to set up a switch node because these trees are really heavy, and I'm going to just switch them off for now so that this is lighter. And I'm going to bring these leaves closer to the rod. So by just adjusting this. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, some leaves are floating on the surface. So we can also just use, I have this raycast thing where we casted everything onto the surface. So instead of doing it before we instance the leaves, I can just skip that part. So they are all above here. Just bring this raycast option and bring it about here. And then this is our geometry. Connect that and we should have something like that. They're still floating, so we need to realize geometry, and that should project them onto the surface like they're actually falling onto the surface. One thing you will notice is that we have some Z fighting, and I think our offset is also a bit too high. So we have some Z fighting, so I can use combine XY, connect this to the Z, connect this to the Z, and just introduce some randomness, some random value. So we get rid of that. Yeah. So we get rid of the Z fighting. And now our leaves are on top of the rocks and every other surface. Let's go back here and just look at everything. Yeah, now I can see the leaves, but I think they're still under at the surface. So we need to push the offset a bit up. Okay. Now, if you want a different leaf, you can select a different leaf. But if you want variation in the leaves so that you have many leaves, we can duplicate, we can just group this into a collection. Shift D, duplicate this. So we have two different materials, blend them together. So you can see how we need to select a different leaf for this. So we either have that or this. We need a way to randomly select what instance gets what material. So I'm going to come back here. I think under instances here, I can do a capture instance, capture attribute, and the attribute I want to capture is just a random value. Connect that to this. If I preview this right now, you see we get some random values, but it's on every point. I want to store that randomness into here. So I'm just going to connect this directly, this, and I call this random leaf. If I bring that attribute in, or if I look at this now, and I want to capture instance, yeah, make sure you capture instance, and the value you want to capture is a random value that ranges from 0 to 1. That gives you this. So if we come here, just preview the attribute, copy this, paste it in here. You see, we get a random value for each instance. And now that we can connect this to that and use a convert math node. So a math node. Now we can actually just use a ramp with the constant interpolation to select which leaves get what material, just like that. And you can further duplicate this. So Shift D, duplicate this entire setup twice. And we can blend this with this. Just get another random value here. Adjust. Let me make sure that I'm using a different texture. So let me switch this to this. Switch selected texture. Switch selected texture. So I can come back here and adjust this. And we should start to see now at least 3 different types of leaves. So we have that. Now if we want a fourth one, we can just mix the resultant again and use the random attribute. Again here, connect that. And change the slider. Now we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, I think, yeah, 4 images, 4 different leaves in our system. Then you can expose the parameters you want, like exposing the general width of the path. Yeah, that's how you make that. If you want the project files, they're going to be available in the description. And yeah, so thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.